Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Criminals humiliated him. Without knowing, he was a former hitman. In the quiet suburb of Clearwater in southern Arizona, the days were alike and passed slowly. The sun was strong, but the evening breezes made the air bearable. It was a residential neighborhood like so many others, with well-kept white picket fences, neatly painted mailboxes, perfectly trimmed lawns, and small dogs walked at the same time every morning. The neighbors there led a simple, almost choreographed life. Every Sunday, families would grill, children would play ball in the street, while adults would talk about insurance, interest rates, and the weather. The crime, the shouting, the chaos of the world seemed distant, almost unreal. Clearwater had a reputation as a haven of peace, a well-kept cocoon shielded from the wounds of the rest of the country. And at the end of the street, West Juniper Lane, in a discreet house, with a slightly sloping roof and a modest but always impeccable garden, lived Nathan Brooks. Nathan was a man who went unnoticed, but whom no one completely ignored. Tall and broad-shouldered despite his years, he walked straight, with a leisurely but firm step. His face, marked by time, bore a neatly trimmed grizzled beard. His eyes, a cold gray, sometimes seemed to peer through things. He always wore the same old brown leather cap, work trousers, and a thick canvas shirt, even under the scorching July sun. Every morning at 6 a.m. sharp, he left his house with his wheelbarrow, his rake, his hedge trimmer, and a worn canvas tool bag. He tended the gardens of several houses in the neighborhood, always silent, always efficient. He didn't say much. He greeted with a small nod, sometimes a "good morning, madam," or a "very nice day," but never more. When the children said hello, he responded with a discreet smile. He never lingered. The neighbors liked him. He did his job well. He didn't ask for anything. And he had this way of being respectful, humble, but without ever appearing submissive. He inspired a certain respect. Perhaps even a silent fear. Rebecca Miller, the single mother of number 42, often said, "This man saw things. Not trivial things. Serious things." Some claimed that he had been military, perhaps in the special forces. Others, more romantic, claimed that he had lived in a monastery in Tibet, to meditate on to forget a painful past. Some more nervous neighbors whispered that he had been involved in a time, or that he was fleeing justice. But all agreed on one point: Nathan Brooks never talked about his past, never. Even the most curious had given up asking him questions. And yet, her house seemed full of secrets. From the outside, everything was in order: plain curtains, shutters closed at night, an immaculate lawn. But one basement window was always veiled, and the light that one sometimes saw in the night did not resemble that of a night light. Inside, in a room that he never opened to the rare visitors, was a slightly detached parquet floor. Under this parquet, a buried chest, sealed by years of voluntary oblivion. In this chest, a well-oiled antique revolver, a military watch, a folding knife engraved with a long-gone name, passports with multiple identities, and a series of yellowed newspaper clippings that told of mysterious deaths across the continent. It was the sanctuary of his past. A past that Nathan carried in silence. A past heavy with blood. There is 25 years old, Nathan Brooks was not a simple gardener with a back bent by the years. In the darkest circles of organized crime, he was a legend. A name that was whispered in the cellars of Brooklyn, in the alleys of Medellin, or in the casinos of Macau. A name that made cartel leaders and corrupt generals shudder. The Grey Wolf. A pseudonym born in blood and discretion. Nathan was what was called a cleaner, a professional in complex assassinations, untouchable targets, missions classified as impossible. He never failed. He was watching. He was planning. And he hit. Always once. Always inevitably. He never spoke to his targets. He never left a trace. Only a recurring motif, like an involuntary signature, a brutal silence, as if the world stopped for a second before life left the body of its prey. He had worked for Italian families in New York, for Miami narcos, for the Sinaloa cartels, and even for paramilitary groups in South America, where death was a mere political tool. He was neither loyal nor traitorous. He was a ghost for hire, a solitary predator. But the gray wolf wasn't born a killer. He became a weapon out of necessity. Then, one day, the unexpected happened: he fell in love. Her name was Elena, a humanitarian doctor he met in Venezuela during a clandestine operation. She knew nothing about his real life. And he hid everything from her, until the day they decided to flee together. Far from the blood. Far from the instigators. They married in secret and briefly settled in a small village in Colombia, believing they had cast shadows. But no one escapes this world. One morning, a coded message reached him: the organization that had trained him had discovered him. They had sold him to the cartels. A betrayal. A punishment for leaving the path. A few days later, Elena was killed in an attack targeting Nathan. A car bomb. His body was never found whole. It was the last day of the Grey Wolf. He set fire to what remained of his cache. Disappeared into the mountains. And erased even his name. For years, he traveled under different identities, sleeping in train stations, living in motels, resurfacing only to disappear again. Then one day, he found Clearwater in a map. An ordinary town. Forgotten. Calm. Perfect. He bought a small house with cash. Changed his name to Nathan Brooks. And began to garden. What for others was simple fieldwork, became for him a rite of reparation. Cutting, planting, cleaning, maintaining. Every gesture had meaning. Each plant a symbol. The earth, for him, slowly absorbed his sins. But even peaceful places have their shadows. For some time now, something has been brewing in Clearwater. A dull tension, like a weed that you can't see growing but that is eating away at the roots. A small gang, barely out of adolescence, was making people talk about him. 3 young people, arrogant and reckless, who wanted to mark their territory. Their leader, Diego Carter, the son of a former inmate, wanted to make a name for himself. Muscular, wary, always searching the eyes of others to see fear. He called himself a street leader, but he was just an ego-driven kid. By his side, Luis Ramirez, the silent one. More dangerous than Diego, because he almost never spoke. He observed. He imitated movie killers, but had already stabbed a man in a dark alley. And finally, Tyrell Chino Harris, the youngest. Always with his phone, always filming humiliations, robberies, beatings. He dreamed of becoming a social media star. A street influencer. Within weeks, they became a plague in the neighborhood. They stole bikes, tagged walls, broke windows, and burglarized garages. But their favorite pastime, intimidate the weakest. They insulted pensioners, whistled at women alone, and pushed children out of school. They were looking for fear in the eyes, like dogs testing fences. And then, one day, they came across Nathan. It was a Tuesday afternoon in July, hot and dry, as it often is in Clearwater. The sun beat down hard on the pavement, and the hedges smelled of freshly cut cypress. In the distance, there was the drone of a sprinkler, and the metallic sound of Nathan's radio, perched on the edge of a low wall, played old blues, almost muted. Nathan was trimming the hedges in front of the house of Rebecca Miller, a woman in her 40s, with a gentle but strong gaze, who was raising her little boy alone. For months, she had observed Nathan with a kind of silent respect. He wasn't talkative, but every gesture he made seemed to convey a reassuring calm. She sometimes brought him a strong black coffee, without sugar. He would nod, murmur a barely audible "thank you," and resume his task. But that Tuesday, the calm was broken. The sound of an engine ripped through the air. A modified old scooter sped down the driveway, its wheels squealing on the asphalt. Diego Carter was at the handlebars, his sunglasses on his nose, an arrogant smile playing on the corner of his lips. At the back, Luis Ramirez chewed gum silently, and Chino, camera in hand, was already filming. "Yo! They made that," Chino said, laughing, pointing his camera at Nathan. "They stopped the scooter right in front of the hedge." "Look at that old rat, mowing lawns like a slave," Diego sneered. Nathan didn't even look up. He held his shears with precision, as if carving something sacred. He cut a branch, picked it up, and carefully placed it in a burlap sack. This silence, this indifference, it irritated Diego. "Aren't you ashamed of being exploited like this? What are you, a tramp?" Luis burst out into a short laugh. Chino zoomed in on Nathan's face, searching for an expression. A reaction. A flaw. But there was nothing. Nothing but a cold, distant, almost empty gaze. A look that asked for nothing. That offered nothing. As if Nathan was watching through off them. As if they didn't even exist. And that, Diego couldn't stand it. He approached abruptly, with aggressive steps. He stopped less than a meter away. Nathan didn't move. With a wave of the hand, Diego kicked Nathan's leather cap, knocking it into the leaves. Then he nudged him with his shoulder. "Chino filmed everything. Pick that up, Grandpa. Or we'll make you pick it up, okay?" Silence. Time seemed to slow down. The wind blew gently through the branches. A lawnmower in the distance shut off. Rebecca, outside her window, watched the scene, motionless, worried. Nathan bent down slowly. He picked up his cap. He gently patted it to remove the leaves and dust. He carefully placed it back on his head. Then he looked up at Diego. Diego had never seen this look, neither hateful nor fearful. But of an icy intensity, old. Fatal. "You don't know what you just woke up to," he whispered in a voice almost inaudible, but sharp as a blade. Diego took a step back for a moment. Luis frowned. Chino stopped filming for a brief moment. There was something in the air, a strange vibration, a silence as thick as fog. But like all arrogant young people, they took it for a show. For a dramatic retort. And they all three laugh. "Who does this old man think he is? Jason Bourne?" Diego mocked. "Yeah, go ahead, lone wolf. You want to scare us?" Chino added. And they got back on the scooter, squealing the tires, laughing and screaming like kids from a bad music video. But what they didn't understand was that what they had just awakened was not a threat. It was not a game. It was not a crazy old man. It was a sleeping beast. An ancient predator, which the world believed to have disappeared. And a man who had spent his life giving death, and who had learned not to tremble. And that day, Nathan Brooks realized he couldn't bury his past forever. He wasn't looking for revenge. But sometimes the world pushes repentant monsters to remember off what they really are. That night, as the neighborhood sank into a heavy silence, Nathan didn't sleep. The house seemed asleep, but in reality, every creak of wood, every breath of wind against the windows seemed to resonate in his chest. He had heard the muffled laughter of Diego and his friends, the backfiring engines, their insults. It all came flooding back. He gently placed his cup of cooled coffee on the kitchen table and walked over to the basement door, hidden behind a large cabinet. His hand trembled slightly as he turned the rusty old key in the lock. The metallic click echoed in the darkness of the cellar. Below, the dim light of a bare bulb illuminated a metal chest, weathered by time. Nathan carefully lowered the lid. Inside, everything seemed frozen in time. A black steel watch, including glass, still bore some shards of dried blood, a souvenir of a distant night. A pair of tactical gloves, worn but carefully maintained, ready to be put on at any time. An Italian folding blade, whose handle of blackened wood bore a fine, almost invisible engraving, an ancient symbol. And above all, a thick file, connected in leather, containing lists, photos, names. Those of the men that he had eliminated, coldly, without hesitation. Faces that he could never forget, even if he wanted to. Nathan closed his eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, feeling his heart race. The breath of the beast, that old predator lurking within him, was returning to the surface. His past, as dark as an abyss, was calling to him. But this time, it wouldn't be to kill. No. This time, he was going Tadich. 2 days later, night had once again spread its black blanket over Clearwater. As midnight, Diego, Luis and Chino, intoxicated by their audacity and recent successes, decided to take the next step, burglarizing the house of Nathan, the old gardener, to film him and ridicule him once and for all. They approached silently, avoiding the streetlights, taking advantage of the complicit darkness. They had known the house well for days, had watched it, kept an eye on it. The back seemed the most accessible part. They forced open a window. Luis slipped inside first, followed closely by Diego and Chino, who still had his phone on, ready to film every moment. But as soon as they set foot in the salon, a sharp click sounded. The door they had entered through slammed shut behind them, a bolt falling with a metallic clang that could no longer be ignored. The lights suddenly went out, plunging the room into pitch blackness. A deathly silence fell, broken only by their rapid breathing and the frantic beating of their hearts. Then, in this silence, a deep, serious, calm voice resounded in the darkness. "You're in my den now." A cold shiver ran down their spines. In the darkness, shadows moved with frightening precision. Nathan moved like a silent shadow, invisible, swift, relentless. He neutralized the intruders one by one, silently, with surgical efficiency. No unnecessary blows, no visible anger. Just the coldness of a man who knows death like an old friend. With their hands tied and their phones confiscated, they were now at his mercy. Suddenly, the lights came back on, revealing the wall in front of them transformed into a giant screen. A series of images were projected. Newspaper articles describing mysterious assassinations. Gruesome autopsy photos, blurred but explicit. Classified documents, sealed top secret. Nathan stood before them, calm, imposing. In a firm voice he spoke, without anger, without hatred, but with the strength of one who has seen everything, experienced everything. "I was a hitman. The Grey Wolf. I saw men like you beg for their lives, cry, plead for mercy. I saw fear devour their souls before death took them." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "I'm letting you go alive. Only once. Use it wisely. Otherwise, next time it won't be a warning." The silence resumed, heavy, oppressive. And in Nathan's eyes, there was no longer any gardener. There was only the Grey Wolf. At dawn, an eerie silence reigned in the neighborhood. Rebecca opened her shutters, drawn by muffled noises coming from the street. What she saw froze her. In front of his house, 3 teenagers lay on the sidewalk. Tied up neatly, their hands tied behind their backs with hemp rope. Their faces were pale, their eyes swollen. They weren't crying like children, they were crying like people who had seen something they weren't supposed to see. Something they could never forget. Rebecca ran out. She recognized Diego, Luis, and Chino. She wanted to call the police, but one of the boys, his voice trembling, said, "No, no, please. Not the police. We just want to go home." They never told each other what had happened. Not to the cops. Not to their parents. Not to each other. Something had broken inside them that night. An arrogance. An illusion. A form of ignorance. As soon as he returned home, Chino deleted all his videos, his accounts, his social networks. He never touched a camera again. Luis returned to his uncle's garage. He learned to repair engines in silence. He stopped hanging around with tough guys. He wore simple clothes and kept his head down. And Diego, the most arrogant of the 3, the one who dreamed of fame, likes, and domination, left town without warning. It was rumored he had gone to stay with a cousin in Denver. No one really tried to find out why. Meanwhile, Nathan went back to work as if nothing had happened. The hedges were trimmed with even more precision than before. The flower beds exploded with color in the June sunshine. His old gardener's hat was back on his head, his pruning shears in his right hand. The neighborhood was returning to its tranquility. But something had changed. No one ignored him anymore. People greeted him with respect. Some young people lowered their eyes when they passed him. A neighbor, who had always thought Nathan was too quiet, offered him a bag of rare seeds as a thank you. Even the dogs seemed to walk calmly in front of his house. One day, as he was planting a climbing rosebush near Rebecca's fence, she approached with a hot cup of coffee. She watched him work for a long time in the morning silence. Then she asked softly, "What did you do to them, Nathan?" He barely looked up. A calm, almost sad smile crossed his weathered face. "I showed them what a man becomes when he forgets respect." Rebecca remained silent. Then, slowly, she nodded. It wasn't a threat. Not revenge. It was a lesson. Unforgettable. Unbreakable. In the golden light of dawn, Nathan Brooks continued to dig. His hands were rough, full of earth and memories. He was planting life, flower after flower, in a world he had known for too long under another guise. And finally, for the first time in a long time, he felt free.